Hey, welcome to Cabin Fever. This is the quarantine edition. I'm having to stay at home now. I don't have it, but I was around some people that might, so I gotta stay home. But I had a great chance right now to bring in Alex Del Barrio from Channel Five, and Alex, it's a new gig for you. You just you just came into Channel Five. What's it been like for you to? First of all, you get into Channel Five, but then the season is what it is. It's all messed up. What's been the most challenging part of your new gig?
Well, it's been really strange. Thanks for having me, Jake. First of all, especially since we haven't had a chance to kind of do one of these things in a while. We did the podcast last year, Spiked, and we had a lot of fun with that. So I'm glad that you kind of continued in this space here a little bit, because I think the Valley sorely needs it. But to answer your question, yeah, it's a really interesting time to kind of start a new job, especially here covering local sports. I mean, we went, goodness, I think I'm trying to remember when I started, because all the months started running into each other, right? Once we kind of went into quarantine in March. So started in June, and, we were already done with what would have been any high school baseball season or any of that stuff. So I would have been coming in during the summer months anyway. But one of the things that hurt us, especially from a planning perspective, is just that is not knowing what type of season, if any season, we were going to have. So for those that don't understand kind of the TV business, especially at the local level, covering high school sports, that's a big moneymaker for us at Channel 5, and really for any local station in the state of Texas. And so you're trying to plan out what your coverage is going to look like, how many photographers are you going to have, how many games you're going to cover on a given night. Am I going to have 2 reporters or 3 reporters out there? Just all of those kind of little things that kind of go into what kind of like special segments are you going to have? Because, Joel, who had been here for a while, had his segments that he liked to do. When I was at Fox or at the other place, I had the other segments that I like to do. And so I wanted to make sure that we were continuing along with the legacy of Channel 5, but at the same time trying to freshen things up. But we couldn't plan any of that stuff. And all those things that we wanted to do, we kind of had to push off until we knew we were going to have some semblance of a season. And even then we were dealing with, are we going to be allowed to go to these games? Are we going to allowed to go to practice? Can we do our 2-a-day tour where we go cover a different school every night? We have pretty strict protocols at KRGV about going out, like on who's allowed in the building and who's not allowed in the building, and who's working from home and who's not working from home. So it just kind of, all these things kind of compiled on top of each other from a planning perspective, that kind of really hurt us. But so I mean, that's obviously the biggest challenge. And obviously, we're going through a transition. We're debuting a new set. So we've been kind of working out of the newsroom, and I've been working out of my sports office. So that's kind of been unique. But we adjust, and I think that's kind of all of our lives right now. You're in quarantine right now, and it's one of those things that we just have to deal with. Where if anything happens, we just kind of make an adjustment and move on. And honestly, it's a pretty close relationship to sports. When somebody goes down, it's next man up, and it's a similar thing where, if something happens, something changes, you just have to make an adjustment and just kind of keep going. But things have been going well at Channel 5. I'm glad to be, part of the number one. It was weird at first, I'll be honest, just because you've worked for the competition for so long, or worked in a different, aspect of things. When I was doing media relations at the Roadrunners, or, with the Vipers, or with Pan Am. So you saw things from multiple perspectives, but you're also, when you were working on a different station, literally the competition, you certainly wanted to challenge and you wanted to improve, but everyone knows who the number one station is in town. It's always been that way. And to be able to kind of carry on that legacy of what we've done at Channel 5, from a sports perspective now, it means a lot to me. So I'm thrilled to be there, and, hopefully we can get through this and we can actually kind of do some of the stuff that I imagined to be doing once I started.
With football being the way it is, and the schedules aren't ever really set. I mean, for example, we just found out this weekend that Nicky Rowe was going to be playing Palmview on Wednesday. Originally, I think it was supposed to be Donna. Oh no, sorry, Donna. I believe it's Donna. I gotta check my. Yeah,
It was supposed to be Donna this week.
Yeah. And originally last week they were talking about Brownsville Vets. What's it been like for you to try to like figure out what your game of the week is going to be, because it's always changing and you never know with COVID.
I'm not even doing a game of the week or calling anything the game of the week because we don't know these teams the way we have in the past, right? Where, we get the previews, obviously the Dave Campbell's preview, and we obviously have talked to our coaches, but even then we were dealing with a situation, Jake, and you know this, where there was some question of, are some of these players going to play? Are their parents going to opt them out? Are they going to transfer because their particular school's not going to play? What are their rosters going to look like? And, what were the returning Letterman numbers were all over the place. And I think everything is kind of settled into where it was supposed to be. I think with the exception of obviously the two La Jolla schools that aren't playing. And obviously Valley View had never started practice, who I believe they haven't made it a formal announcement, but it looks like they're done. Obviously Rio Hondo, you feel for those kids in Rio Hondo, even Port Isabel, who luckily got a non-district game because they were only going to have one game really. And that's next week against Raymondville. So, but to answer your question about game of the week, like we don't even call it that. We just kind of said, all right, what's our schedule for this week? Who's actually playing? And then, try to pick out the best games or the most. I try to pick games by storylines, and I got a lot of this thought from my own philosophy, but also from Clay. Clay Williams, who was at 4 for a long time, who brought me on. You cover the rivalries too, the Bird Bowl. If Santa Rosa had played La Villa, we'd cover the Sugar Bowl. We wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure we put an emphasis on the small schools here at 5, because I think some people will tell you that other than early parts of the season, they kind of would get ignored on 5, and we would do. And that's not to say Dave or Joel ignored them specifically, but there was an emphasis on the big schools, and we have so many big schools. But I think that we've spread things out so much now, especially this year with the McAllens dropping into 5A, Pioneer and Veterans being in 5A Division II, Wesco East dropping down to 5A. Like, you've spread the love between 6A and 5A now, that even when you're going to get down to 5A Division II, like, those are still big games. And we can talk about those. But like this week, we had Hidalgo La Feria. Hidalgo hasn't given up a point. La Feria, 40 points apiece. And I thought they were going to be down this year a little bit, but their offense has picked up right where they left off. So we had Monica at that game. We've sent Erica kind of all over the place. We did a live shot for Lyford at Fremont in that first week because they were the only game kind of in town. So we put in a little bit extra emphasis on the small schools. Also, we're seeing so many of these teams play on Thursdays now that we can almost have 2 first and goal weeks, like first and goal nights, where we can have 3 or 4 highlights on a Thursday, 5 highlights on a Thursday, probably this week. We're gonna have Wednesday night football this week. It's just strange. So basically what happens is I take the schedule on a given Sunday and then try to put it together with our photographers and try to see who can go where and who's closest to what and all that. But we've had to adjust on the fly. I mean, literally 2 Thursdays ago, I had Erica Ross, who does a great job for us as a reporter and weekend sports anchor. She was at Sharyland. And Pioneer, an hour before game time, 30 minutes before game time, says, hey, McAllen Memorial, we can't play. And she was there, and she was covering breaking news of the fact that the game was not going to be played. And then she later had to come to Mission to do the live shot from Veterans versus Edinburgh Vela, who ended up having to both have to quarantine. Those are the things that have kind of happened to us this year. I mean, so we've just kind of had to adjust as we go along and see what happens. And we've had, even on a Friday night, we learned, or this past Thursday, Donna North and Ed Couch Elsa were to play. They were supposed to play on Thursday, but then when Donna had to shut down, they decided to move that game to Friday. They didn't tell anybody, or at least they didn't tell me. So those are the things that are happening. I mean, to the point where this. I mean, Bill's calling Manny Gomez in the saying, hey, you guys want to play, and they put a game together. It's just been it's unbelievable. Talking to Orlando Garcia this week, over at Far, he's like, I never would have thought we'd be in a situation where we're like basketball or soccer, where a team has to forfeit or cancel or whatever, and we have to make up a game on the spot. I never thought we'd ever get there, and that's where we're at this year. I'm glad that we're playing. I am kind of on the side of being careful as possible. Obviously, I probably lean a lot more that way than probably a lot of other folks. But I'm glad that we're playing and trying to do it safely. But when things happen, we need to adjust.
You brought up something I wanted to talk about was Montestumbaugh over in Hidalgo.
Yeah.
Do you think this is one of those things? I mean, last year he had a good season, but this year, he's finally getting. Well, it's not really a full season, but he's finally getting to that point right now where. Do you feel he's really happy? Like he gets to rub it in to the people in like PI that kind of, that chased him out. Like Monty got screwed in PI, and we're not gonna lie about that. But do you think that he's happy that he's finally being able to show everybody? See, it wasn't necessarily the town, it was also the coach. Because a lot of people were like, oh, anybody could win at PI.
Well, I think people have shown the last couple of years that that's not necessarily the case, right? And I think PI, PI is a unique situation, right? And I think the football fans there can be on the fickle side of things. They're a lot like Ed Couch Elsa fans, right? Where they know what a good team looks like on a given year. They know who the players are going into camp. So they're very, very passionate fans and know what their team's supposed to look like. But sometimes on a given year, they'll have unrealistic expectations, especially based on the district that they play in. And there have been years, these last 4 to 5, and you can go back even to the tail end of the Stumbaugh years, where they were in districts where A, they were down talent-wise, and B, that they could not compete in. It was just a challenge to make the postseason. And I think now what you're seeing, and I don't know how good of a job Tony V's is going to have done this year, because they're playing 2 games. So I'm going to take everything out of the equation with PI. They've got great fans, but they've been very fickle when it comes to their coaching. And honestly, I don't want to rub salt in the wound, but I think they've made a couple of mistakes with their coaching hires the last couple of times. I think they made the right move bringing Tony V back. A lot of people will say, well, maybe you go with a younger coach so they can stay there for a little while. But, Tony V knows that place like the back of his hand and knows how to win there and knows how to win at this level and knows how to win at any level. So I praise him. But going back to Monty, look, Monty's a football coach, man. And he'll tell you all he cares about is being on the football field on Friday nights, coaching his team and trying to get them to win. He doesn't care if it's with an H on his hat, with a PI on his hat, with a W on his hat, with an M on his hat. It doesn't matter. He's just glad to be out there on Friday nights. But I think for the people around him and for the people like you and me and the other folks that really follow things down here in the Valley, it's a sense of validation that we know what we were talking about when we talk, like Monty's not washed up, or Monty's not a guy who's just overseeing his coordinators. Like he actually can coach and build a program. Because let's look at the last few years of Hidalgo, before Monty got there, it was a struggle there too. And I think he's proven that he can rebuild a program, and he's doing some awesome things. That was a very impressive win on Friday. I thought it would be honestly a little bit closer. I honestly thought LaFeria would win. I didn't think that when I saw that their defense had shut out 2 teams, I was like, okay, well, let's see how they do against LaFeria. And when they really kind of put the wall up against them, you got to start taking that team seriously, especially for a deep playoff run, which, look, Monty's had teams go deep when he was at PI. You and I have been there when they've gone deep. Sitting on roofs of press boxes, calling games. So we know what they can do. So I'm kind of excited to see what they could do in the playoffs.
Yeah, and for a lot of people that don't know, you and I go back quite a ways, back to the early part. I think we were one of the first people in the state, and I like to tell everybody I'm not sure if I actually know that for sure, but we were the first ones to start doing actual video broadcasts of high school football games down here. Yeah. And we had some big ones. I mean, especially baseball. I mean, I think about the ones where you covered Sherryland versus Eagle Pass, where Eagle Pass had it was a very chippy game.
Dude, I still remember, from a football side of things, we had remember that year that Mission Veterans and Westlake East were both unbeaten, and they played at Bobby Lackey on
that incredible hit
that last week of the season. I'm trying to remember who the quarterback was for Veterans.
Adrian
Morales. Yeah, when Adrian Morales was the quarterback, who was doing some incredible things. I think he had only thrown 2 picks all year, and then threw 2 picks in that game. And I think Veterans ended up winning that game, if I'm not mistaken. But it was one of the first big games at Bobby Lackey between those 2 teams. We covered that one. I'm trying to remember some of the others. Like we had a ton at Edinburgh at Florida Stadium. We're there on Thursdays with the sun shining right in our face in the old press box.
And we had we did the game with Harlingen ISD or CISD where
the 4th round game.
This is like right when my my partnership with Channel 4 went to hell in a handbasket, and it was you and I and the crew from Harlingen. We had instant replay, and it was an awesome experience because that was the first time that it was like me versus them kind of thing. But
right.
But you had the great broadcast that time with Harlingen ISD, and I just remember that was a huge game because I remember watching all those people running onto the field.
Alexander, wasn't it? Laredo Alexander against Harlingen?
No, 4th round was Madison. Remember?
Oh, that's right. But we did.
Yeah. And we did the ones before that. We did the ones before that with Warren, San Antonio Warren.
That's right.
Game before, and those were incredible games.
But we were doing it way before RSL. We were doing it way before Texan Live up in the state. I mean, it was pretty much TSRN and us, really.
Yeah.
And TSRN was radio only. I think SHS Sports in the Austin area came on like maybe 2 or 3 years later. They started experimenting with the video streams a little bit, and UIL didn't really have
there were no limitations at the time.
There were no limitations or rules, or they were very iffy on what the rules actually existed. And then it was, we really kind of we were kind of trailblazers in that regard in terms of like we kind of made them reset the rules of it at UIL. And better for worse.
Yeah, and we didn't have a bad crew. We had guys that could do broadcasts. And then there's Jonah later on and stuff like that. There was, we had a decent crew. I mean, I remember
Kevin
Tino
Sanchez would help us out.
Yeah, Kevin. Tino did color with you a couple times. Tino Villarreal, the coach at St. Joe's. So we had a good thing going. But we all you went your separate ways because you went to I think the Globetrotters.
Yeah, well, I went to go work at Pan Am, and
and then they told you no.
I wasn't allowed to call high school games because of NCAA rules, and then I went to the Globetrotters. This was 2011. But yeah, and then just kind of things started to. We'll just leave it at that.
Everything morphs.
Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah. But and we're in better places. You've got your gig there at Channel 5, and I've got mine with the district, and they're awesome. It's different than what we used to be. One thing I did want to talk about was G League. Mm-hmm. Okay, the NBA is supposed to start. They're already talking about losing $1 billion starting so late. What do you think is going to happen with the start of the G League? Because they have all those players that are skipping college to go straight to the G League to make some good money. Not millions, but hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
What's going to happen with the G League, you think?
They'll play because they need the players, right? I think we'll have more answers here in the next week or so. Once look, everything happens kind of downhill with the NBA, right? They're going to take care of number one first. They need to figure out how many games they're going to play and when they're going to start, and how they're going to do it. But I'll say this: I can see them going to for the lack of a better term, a bubble showcase format, right? But extended showcase formats, right? And only do it for maybe 2 months. Mm-hmm. I can see a scenario where they don't have a season like that we're used to seeing, where these markets that all these teams are in. And remember, when the Vipers were first created, there were a lot more independently owned teams. Now the Vipers are one of the few independently owned teams, and most of the teams are either owned or 85% owned by their NBA club. It wasn't the case, the first 5 years that the Vipers were in the league. And so now the Vipers, after creating that hybrid affiliation, more teams started to go that route. But then you started to see more of these teams just buy their teams outright. When the Warriors bought Dakota and moved them, and now it's like almost a prerequisite when a new team comes in the league. It's just already owned by whoever, and the league doesn't have a team anymore. And I think there's maybe one other team that's independently owned, and I think that's Erie. And the only reason they keep Erie around is they draw a little bit, and whenever there's a team that doesn't have an affiliate, they just stick them kind of with Erie.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, man. Like, I'm completely I'm not as in tune with the league as I was when I was covering it, obviously. But from the things that I've been hearing, they got to find ways to work these guys out that are part of this. I forget what the name of it. They came up with the elite. It's not the elite, but it's but it's something along those lines, right? And it's really just kind of the top players that decided to forego playing in college to play in this league. And you're right, they're making like $500 or $270,000 or whatever it is in a given time. And they've improved D-League salaries anyway, and especially with the two-way contracts for some guys. But I guess the overall point is they got to find ways to get these guys games or at least reps, so that guys who aren't on two-way contracts, or guys that are on two-way contracts, they're not spending their entire 45 days or whatever their max is in the NBA, that they're down in the D League getting some work in. So I can see them going to like all divisional play, where they limit the travel and do multiple game series, like where you play Austin in Austin 3 games in a row. You play, and then they come down to Rio Grande Valley and play 3 games in a row, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. I mean, I think there's those scenarios. I can see them going, obviously, to like a 30-game season, 40-game season, something along those lines, just so they can get the games in. So I think you'll see some sort of season, but I'm still iffy because you got to have these protocols in place. They'll do them at the NBA level. Where did I go? They'll do them at the NBA level, but I don't know if they're going to put these protocols in place at the G League level, which has kind of been the problem for small college, right? And why small college has moved to the spring, because how are you going to keep these kids safe? How are you going to make sure you're testing them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And if you don't have the financial wherewithal to do it, it doesn't make sense. Now, that therein lies the question with the Vipers, who lost a whole soccer season, right, with their Toros. When I say lost it, I mean, see, they played 16 games, but they didn't have any fans except for one game, right, the whole season. So the revenue is shot for that. If you go a whole season of G League games without, fans, what are you doing? Now, I think the arena in Edinburgh gives them opportunities to have socially distanced crowds, and obviously the high schools are doing it right now, so maybe there's a way to do it. But not every state and not every market is going to be capable of doing that. There was a story out today where the Raptors are looking for a United States venue.
They're looking at Kentucky, right? Louisville? To play
their game. They're looking kind of everywhere. They were talking to Louisville. Louisville's apparently out now, but Nashville's in the mix. The one that seems like the likely destination is Newark, New Jersey, because they have the Prudential Center there, and they don't use it for anything obviously than the Devils, and there's no concerts that are being had, so there's opportunities to play there. Plus the other teams in their division, Brooklyn and New York, are really close. Philly and Boston, they're all train rides away or short 3-hour bus rides away, so it's easy to get to those places if they have to go to a pod or interdivisional schedule, at least in the early part of the season. So I think the jury's still out on what the G League is going to do, but it'll be interesting.
Okay, the one thing you brought up, the Vipers, and here's the interesting thing about the Vipers. The Rockets got a new head coach, and Daryl Morey is no longer there either. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the first time that I can kind of like look at the Vipers and think, are you going to become like most of the G League teams where they don't necessarily do what Daryl Morey did, where they create a farm system? Like where they're, like he really did a great job of sending down players to get playing time, to hone their skills, all that kind of stuff. A lot of teams don't do that. And you've seen that with some of the teams in the G League. They've got maybe two guys on the team that are really, really good, and the rest of them, I don't want to say are mediocre, but they're not the same caliber of players that the Vipers were getting for a while. Do you think that that's going to change?
I don't. And the reason why is this. It's still very cheap to develop players the way that the Rockets have done it. And they figured out ways to utilize players, Daniel House, for instance. And Rafael Stone, who was the chief counsel for the Rockets for many, many years under the same Tad Brown regime, and Tad Brown is still there with the Rockets. So, from a corporate perspective, he's still there. So it's still the same regime. Daryl Morey's just gone, right? And he's going to go do his thing. But most of the basketball ops people are the same people. Rafael Stone has been with the organization for 10, 12 years. He's been down here a ton. He knows what it is. And he's been the head of basketball operations just under Daryl for the last year and a half. So I think at least in the short term, it's going to be status quo, what we're used to seeing. And I think there's still a level of commitment that look, here's the thing. If Tillman Fertitta, we're going to have to buy the Vipers, I think you'd see massive changes, right? If they weren't a hybrid team and he had to own the Vipers, I think you could see, first of all, because that's the big problem right now in Houston is they think Tillman Fertitta is cheap and he's not going to pay the luxury tax on anything. And maybe he's going to end up trading James Harden in a year or two, whatever. He says otherwise, but I think most people in Houston, if you follow Rockets Twitter, will say one thing. So there's this idea that he's cheap right now, especially that he paid too much for the franchise. His restaurant business is hurting right now because of the pandemic. Obviously, the ticket revenue is not there right now. The corporate revenue is not there, especially from China, which used to be because of the Daryl situation, and maybe Daryl being gone helps that a little bit. But I think for the short term, they realize, well, it's still a good way to develop players. It's the cheap way to develop players, and everyone, the numbers of what it costs from a basketball perspective are roughly the same around the league. So they're not going to be able to do it any cheaper than they're already doing it. It's either do it at the same cost mark that they're doing it, or not do it at all, like Portland. And obviously Portland hasn't been able to use the D-League for several years at this point. They're still trying to figure that out. So I don't see much changing, but I think it's something to watch for in 2, maybe 3 years from now.
All right, and the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about, and we won't throw out names here, okay? Because I don't want to publicize anybody. I don't want to make anybody feel bad, except for one person. But look, you've covered sports for a long time, pro, high school, college. All right. Would you, as a media person, would you ever take a swipe at a kid for just a kid has lost some games, but it's not. It's sports is a team sport. Could you find yourself doing that to a high schooler?
You don't cover high school sports the way you cover pro sports, right? So, like, we've all seen the graphics on ESPN that if a quarterback is 0-10 against this particular opponent over the course of 15 years in the NFL, you're going to see that graphic, and and it matters in the storyline telling of a game, right? But you don't cover you don't cover college athletes like that. And you certainly don't cover high school athletes like that, because one, the dynamics of youth sports is different just in general. These kids are not being paid. These kids are, in theory, playing for the fun of the game and maybe for an opportunity to play at the next level, right? You don't, and from a talent evaluation perspective, you wouldn't judge a quarterback at the high school level based on a win-loss record, at least not primarily. You're judging by arm strength. You're judging by the other factors like height and quickness and 40 time and all those things, right? So what a quarterback does in high school, how you're evaluating him for the next level, that's a different story. And I obviously know what you're talking about here, and whether I don't want to give him the publicity that he sorely wants. But I think it's embarrassing that we put that guy is still able to be on the sidelines. And I know that there's some districts that have made the decision to ban him from the sidelines. But I think what he did this week, and really go after a high school kid, is one of the most embarrassing and destructive things I've seen in Valley sports media since I've been doing this for 15 years. They used to say Clay was harsh on coaches, right? On the show. They used to say that, I think the three of us were harsh sometimes on coaches. Like, we tried to avoid the whole hot seat argument or discussion, but it was a discussion that ended up always happening, at least in a roundabout way. Like, got to be worried. This guy's got to be worried. It's 2 straight losing seasons or whatever. He's got to have a good year. But even then, we'd avoid those conversations. We wouldn't cover the firing until the firing happened, right? We'd talk about it amongst ourselves or whatever. But we would never be critical, especially for like, let's take a for instance situation. I'm never going to criticize a Gabe Pena at Economides the same way you're going to judge a guy like David Gilpin at Mission Veterans, right? Because of we understand the dynamics that are happening at those programs, right? That go beyond just the athletes that are there. But there are some guys here that think that you're supposed to win just because of the school that you happen to be at and the athletes that allegedly go there, when those aren't all of the factors kind of at play. And when you make it a personal vendetta because of a familial, bickering or issue, or the fact, that you're upset of the way that of the playing time of someone of that ilk got, it's just destructive, and it's just wrong to kind of go after a kid 16, 17, 18 years old, when you're a grown man. Like, what are you doing? You're literally making money off of these kids, or saying that you're making money off of these kids. We'll just put it at that. But that's my problem. That's my problem with it. I just think that there are people that are doing this for the wrong reasons. And when we were doing this, back in the day with the site, we made an effort to get. This was before YouTube was a thing, and YouTube was a thing, but before the recruiting aspect was easier for kids to do. We would help them with their videos so that they could send them to college, and our streams helped a lot of those kids get noticed. And we didn't do it to get rich. We were hoping to have a business plan, but we did it for kind of the good of the community and for the quality of life situation. And there's some people out there that are just trying to make a buck on some people's names. It's the argument right with college athletes, but I went on a tangent there. I know I didn't answer.
No. I wanted an outside opinion, because, by the way, you're not the only one. Matt Stepp wrote some stuff on his Twitter in regards to this. There were other people. Look, the kid we're talking about is a wonderful quarterback, and by no means, is it one game going to rest on a QB? It's not a QB doesn't, especially in high school. Right. A QB can't win a game for you if he's always on his back. It's a new program, so I give it up to the kid.
Starting from scratch, it's moving to a different level with a coach only in his second year. There's a lot. Again, these are all factors that you and I understand. And I know it's different for you. You obviously work for the district, and I obviously have to. I'm a journalist and I'm an anchor for. So I have to look at things a specific way. And I didn't mean. And I want to emphasize. I don't mean any disrespect to Economides or Gabe Pena, using it as the example of knowing that the dynamics of trying to win there are different than trying to win at Mission Veterans or Robert Vela High School or what's another program up at Harlingen?
Like yeah. The cupboard's not always as full.
Right. It's like you go to the Brownsville situation, right? Like winning at Lopez, it means maybe once every 5 years getting to the playoffs, right? as opposed to winning at Hannah, which you should be making the playoffs every other year or in 2-year cycles, right? Just because of the dynamics of districts and the dynamics of who's in your district, the dynamics of what kind of athletes you have access to, all of those things come into play. I was having a long conversation, believe it or not, with a couple of my colleagues there at the station, non-sports people at the office, about and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Jake. Actually, we were talking about the dynamics of, say, a program like Donna North, right, who's in 6A. From a numbers perspective, meaning numbers of athletes, they have no business being in 6A. But if you look at enrollment numbers of when they take those censuses that get sent to the UIL, they obviously have the numbers to be 6A. So I thought of the idea, and I don't know how this would work, but I think that there's a way to do it, and I think it's the fairest way to do it. I think that you should have an athlete declaration day or an athlete declaration week, right? Where everyone at your school on a certain day, whether it's the last day of the previous school year or sometime during the summer or what have you, in the same way you got to get your physicals in, you got to get your athlete declaration form in. And that athlete declaration form, and I guess you would have to do it just on a biannual basis when you do the realignment, that determines your number for your classification. So if you're a place like Donna North, you have to, whatever your numbers are for declaration determines of how many kids are your athlete base, and that determines what classification that you're in.
It would work except for the ADA, the money side of this, which it sucks this way, because you have to, and this is from the educator side, you get paid for every kid that comes to your school, so they're gonna, it's every school wants to be a 6A.
But that would be the case no matter what census wise. I'm talking about from a UIL classification wise, like. You're going to get whatever your enrollment is and your attendance is that determines the school funding. That's a completely different conversation. I'm talking about when UIL sets the alignments and says these are the numbers for, instead of doing it by enrollment, do it by athlete declarations, because it forces your coaches to make sure that those numbers stay high or stay at a certain number, but they need to be declared. They can't participate unless they've declared. Either at one school or another if they transferred, and there's got to be a process for that, right? But like when and obviously schools like Pioneer and veterans would hate me for this, right? But when you look at the numbers that they have at their schools being 5A,
incredible,
2, and then you look, where you getting close to 200 from freshman to senior, and then you look at you look at Brownsville Lopez or Brownsville Porter that's lucky to have 75, 80 kids total in the program. What are we talking about here? Like, how is that the same? How is it the same? And Lopez and Porter are in the higher classification than veterans and Porter. So those are the things that I'm talking about when I'm saying we need to figure out what's a better way to do this, because what's the point of having a program that's going to continuously underperform because they are improperly classified or improperly arranged in a competitive environment.
Yeah, and I go back to your thinking on this is when I was a coach at Edinburgh, when I first was there, and I was coaching the boys JV Light program. I had 20 kids just for that program, the JV Light program. By the way, I was the last one in the sub-varsities to win a district championship on the boys' side. Just wanted to throw that out there. In case anybody's looking for a coach. But then I remember when Vela was created, every athlete went over there, and I went back and because my friend became the girls basketball coach, I came in and helped him, and I was coaching the JV. We had 7 girls. So yes, I do understand that, because Edinburgh for a while, their programs got decimated when Vela started because a lot of the kids jumped ship. Football lasted like 2 years before they lost.
And some of these things are cyclical. I think with Edinburgh High, I think they've become a program that things are going to be cyclical for them, right? Much like Rowe. Rowe is a cyclical program in McAllen. Memorial's kind of the program that's seemingly always there because they just seem to always have the athletes that are kind of attracted there. Bobby seemed to be in a situation where it's like every couple of years he'll have a 2-year path and then there's a rebuild year. It's kind of the Hannah situation, right? Hannah's good every couple of years for 2-year spurts. They'll have a down year like they had last year, and now they're back, right? I'm trying to think of another program like that.
That's up and down. I think you look at PSJAs for a while. The PSJAs.
Like, yeah, PSJAs. PSJ North is a cyclical program. PSJ Memorial's not. PSJ Southwest is not. PSJ High should be good every year, right? Because of where they are and where they're getting their kids from. Brownsville veterans, in theory, when they started, they were probably supposed to be that, but they're the way that magnet school works there now, it doesn't happen that way. It's pretty much they're going to be cyclical every year. But it also, you look at the way the districts are aligned now. You got these 10-team districts in the 5A ranks, these big districts. We lost a 6A district, now. So things are a little bit more difficult for teams to make the playoffs, especially in the bottom half. Look at the bottom half of 31 6A now. You got Vela, Mission, PSJ High, PSJ North, and then the rest of the Edinburgh schools, right? So to try to be that fourth team, it's a lot more difficult now. And maybe it's the same when the Weslaco schools were in there, but it's just harder you're basically trying to be the second Edinburgh school to get in, and then the other two are just going to have to be down. Mm-hmm. I think the same is the case for the Brownsville schools, right? Like Hannah will always be kind of competitive, obviously in the 6A ranks, but look at the 5A Brownsville schools. It's always been kind of like, okay, which of the grouping of 4 is going to be good? Is Rivetta going to be good this year? Is it going to be Lopez going to be good this year? Is it going to be, Porter? Porter, usually it's once in a blue moon type of thing. By the way, Carlos Oresti's doing a great job.
Yes, he is.
This year, by the way. I want to give him a shout out because they were getting to that level last year. He's got a lot of those kids back, and they're doing a great job. By the way, so I wanted to give him a shout out. Pace has kind of always been like those. They're in those 2-year cycle. Whenever they have a quarterback like they do now with this Bonda kid, like they're good, right? They're gonna be in the hunt and be in the mix. So I don't know why I bring that point up now, but it's kind of going into the overarching conversation about like how the dynamics of each program are very different, and the expectations of what a coach should do at those programs also needs to be considered when you're evaluating a coach.
Let me ask you this. What do you think? This is the last question, and we can wrap it with this one. What do you think is harder? Maintaining a star program a la Vela, if you came into Harlingen, if you came into Mission Vets right now, or like right after they went to this Sweet 16, what do you think is harder? Running a program and keeping it going like it was, or creating one? Like, what do you think is more difficult?
The thought is, right, like I think the common wisdom would say continuing one, right? But I think if you evaluate people that have taken over programs, it shows that it's easier to kind of take it over because the dynamics of the program are already there, right? Look at Vela, right? And John Campbell, I think, is obviously a really good coach, right?
He's a great coach, yeah.
He's a really, really, really sensational coach. He runs a phenomenal program, inside and out, what have you. But Michael Salinas started the winning there, right? So Michael Salinas is there. I don't know, whether you want to say the enrollment has something to do with it, whether you want to say that kids were moved, whatever on the political end of things you want to say about the Vela Edinburgh situation. The point is they started winning under Michael Salinas, and they're doing the same, if not better, under John Campbell, right? And he obviously had a resume. Maybe that's a poor example, right? But then you go. Then you go and see, I'm trying to think of another program that's been taken over recently and kind of continued its winning. Manny's not going anywhere, right? So, but I think if Manny decided tomorrow he's gone, and Rocky James takes over Harlingen, right? They're going to pick up right where they left off, right? It's the same kids that are going there. It's the same legacy. Even in Mission, right? Coy comes in and kind of takes that next step with them, but the pieces were already starting to have been rebuilt there, right? Who was there before Coy? I'm now trying to remember.
I'm trying to think now. Tom Lee was there, and then after Tom Lee, Mario Pena.
Mario Pena, was it Mario Pena? And then he retired, and then Coy came in.
Yeah.
I thought there was someone in there in between, but
somebody will probably prove us wrong here. Yeah.
Mario Pena, comes around. While we're talking about this, Mario Pena comes around, kind of rebuilds the program. Obviously, he's from the Mission area, had the great success at La Jolla and then San Benito, and then he turns things around, and obviously Coy is kind of taking things back to the next level with Mission. So it's kind of one of those situations where Mario left in 2015, and then Coy's been there already for 5 years.
Wow.
That's hard to believe. But then you talk about building a program, right? Like, let's talk about what Mike's trying to do at PSJ Southwest. And we've talked about the dynamics situation. Mike is kind of known valley-wide as a pretty, intelligent coordinator, right? And he can do it from both sides of the ball. He's been mostly a defensive coordinator, but he's as smart offensively as he is defensively. He's a guy that plays a lot of chess. He understands kind of game theory and war theory and these things, and he likes to read a lot of books, and so he's very cerebral. And I think he has that program believing it's better than it is, right? On paper, I guess is my point. Remember what they did the first half of last year?
Great defense.
Those first 3 games, he decided, you know what? I'm not going to beat these teams, doing it the traditional way. I've got to go and do the triple option thing here, and you got to teach that, and you got to completely buy into that. Otherwise, it's like buying into the slot T or the wing T. You got to buy into that as a program. Otherwise, it's going to fail miserably. But if you do it right, you have a chance to compete, and that's what Mike did. And I think it's harder to start a program because you're starting from basically nothing. You have to, especially if it's your first job, you have to recruit coaches, and you're going to be in a situation where your friends are going to be calling. Guys that want to be coordinators who aren't ready or will ever be ready to be coordinators are calling you, and you got to deal with the political aspect of things. You got to be comfortable with your district saying no to expanding your staff or equipment and things like that. So I think continuing a program is even though no one wants to be the guy after the guy, no one, Chris Cavazos did not want to be the guy that took over for Sonny Detmer, but he did. He had that success, that the window of success at Ed Couch-Elsa. He comes over to Mission, and what happens? They have 4 losing seasons under Chris, 3 losing seasons under Chris Cavazos. So, and it's just one of those situations where it's just it didn't work out because he didn't want to be the guy after the guy. But then Jeff Dykes comes around and Irvin Taylor comes along, and obviously you get some success. But I think especially in the days of splitting schools, I mean, look at Joe Marichala, right? I think Joe's as smart a coach as we have in the Valley. He's out of a job after 1 year at Donna North, right? Is it 1 year or 2 years? I don't know how long.
It was a couple years, I think.
Was it 2 years? I thought he only got 1. But whatever it was, if I had been if high school coaches had agents, right? I would have advised Joe to not take that job. He got 2 years and went 0-20. I would have advised him not to take that job because he was better fit going to another 5A to be a coordinator to take the next year's set of jobs than he would have been taking that job and trying to build that program, which is still looking for an identity because of all of the reasons why we've discussed. So I think in those situations he had enough pride in himself that he could build a program from scratch. But some of those circumstances are outside of your control at the high school level. So I will. The long-winded answer here is obviously I'm going to say it's much, much, much harder to build a program, which is why I think, and you're going to kill me for being a homer on this, which is why I think what David Gilpin has done at Veterans is one of the most impressive things that we've seen down here, kind of ever, because Veterans was nothing before he took over that program, and now it's revered for being one of the most well put together, organized programs in the Valley.
Okay, to that point, and we're going out, we're getting to that hour mark here, but if that's the case, too, I like what you're saying. Max Habecker, for what he did at Roma, because he wasn't fired he quit, but that was pure political garbage over there. What he did in Roma, first of all, I don't understand why he doesn't have a job yet. I mean, he's a DC over at Edinburgh North. I think still. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but last year he was. The guy is gold. Built a program that was a basketball town. I don't understand.
It still
is. It still is. Yeah. Well, yeah. Look what it did. It was like, no, we can't win on the football field. You leave, kind of thing.
Roma's like Duke, right? It's like who cares about the football team, right?
Yeah. I mean, they got a stadium. They should be happy. No, and Roma hasn't been the same since he left, and maybe the grass was dying a little bit. It wasn't as green as it was with while he was winning, but look, he won over there, and that was like Roma was those games that most teams would chalk up to, hey, this is a W for us, and then when he got there and he turned it around. And he went through some crap there. They turned it around, and I give it up to him. Look, he's one of the guys. Joe Marichalar, I think what David did at Mission Vets is awesome. But I think if you're going to look, Max Habecker should be one of those guys to get a job. And there's a lot of OCs that I know and DCs that need a chance, but he's one of the guys.
Again, just because I brought it, David. I mean, there are other guys to add to that list, right? I think Max is certainly what he did there. Hell. We did it when we had the conversation in the playoffs last year. Look at what Leo did at Rio Grande City last year.
Oh, tremendous.
Think of how many guys have come through that place trying to make something. Like Aaron Garcia tried. He had a couple 5-win seasons there. He just couldn't put it all together. Carlos Ingloria, tried. Jesus Lozano, when he was there, he got him to the playoffs a couple of times as well. He had a 7-win season in 06. But, no one could get them to have a real winning season, or at least consistent winning seasons. And I think Rio Grande City is going to struggle this year, obviously, because they're, in the San Antonio situation. But again, that's a guy going into a program that's not succeeding and going in and having an immediate impact. I think you can make the same case with Mark Guess.
Oh yeah.
How many years did Hannah struggle before Mark kind of took it over? Granted, he had the quarterback, he had the defense and the running back to do it. But again, you just because you have those pieces doesn't mean you're going to be successful right off the bat, especially in the district that he's in. Think about the district he competed in to be one play away from being in the 4th round. With San Benito and Harlingen, Los Fresnos, the programs that we're used to talking about of being the 2-3 round deep playoff teams, and he made Hannah that playoff team. So I think you could put him on that list as well. I think you could put David Cantu on that list at Brownsville Vets. That program really didn't even exist, and he was the first technically the second coach because Mark was there first, but it was never when he was a varsity. It was a varsity program at the time, but David Cantu could be on that list. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of names. What's a fun discussion maybe for the end of the year is like who are the coordinators now that were either former coaches or that are the young guys that are looking for their first jobs.
Yeah, and there's a lot, and that's something I've always wanted to do was go talk about OCs and DCs and rate the top 5. There's a lot, and I think eventually they'll get their shots, but it's really hard sometimes, especially when we retread a lot of coaches. But Alex, I appreciate you taking the time to do this because it's Sunday. It's the Cowboys lost again. I know you're not sad about that, and neither am I. So, but
NFL's still been weird for to watch now, and it's weird to watch Tom Brady in a Bucs uniform. It's weird to watch Cam Newton in a Patriots uniform. It's weird to see the Patriots lose. But we need to. I think we should talk about this one final thing before we stop. We got to talk about Sergio Castillo.
Oh yes, he got some kicks in.
He got 3 in today.
Yeah,
he was 3 for 4. That fourth one was blocked at the end of the half. It was not his fault. 55, 48, and 36. He had kicked one last week from 29. He kicked the point after. I mean, a guy that has been trying to get back to this spot since 2014 when he was on the Falcons training camp roster, made all of his kicks when he was with the Falcons, but he was behind a guy that was gonna keep the job because he was, I'm gonna be a Pro Bowler.
Was it Morton Anderson?
No, it wasn't Morton Anderson.
Okay, sorry.
I think Matt
Bryant.
Matt Bryant, I think.
Yeah.
So obviously he was gonna keep the job. And then tryouts at the Steelers getting cut, tryouts at the Browns getting cut, going to Canada, having a great career in Canada, all-star in Canada, going to the AF, it was San Antonio, and going to the XFL, thinking he was going to have a run there, and that gets shut down. He signs in Canada, and they decide we're not going to play this year. And then he ends up on the Jets practice squad. Sam Ficken gets hurt, and back-to-back weeks he's in the starting lineup. I mean, granted, we've obviously had our guys that have made it. Coy back in the day, and obviously Roberto Garza,
Jamar,
Leo Atagus. Jamar had his run, obviously, but Sergio's been plugging away for a while. Those other guys were drafted. Those other guys were had opportunities and had long careers. Those guys were in a grander and more opportune position. This guy went to West Texas A&M, man, and this guy, fought through every single kind of hurdle along the way. The fact that he's still trying to kick 6 years after he was on that training camp roster for the Falcons, and then these last 2 weeks, I mean, what a great story! What a great story for the Valley, for La Jolla, and for Sergio, man.
Yeah, that's a tremendous story, and I almost forgot. And I go, thanks for reminding me, because I think reminding the public, because a lot of people forget about that. A lot of people think kickers are, supplemental, but think about it. Kickers come up huge. I just want to throw this out there. On Saturdays when I was in high school, my friend's dad was the equipment manager for South Dakota State University, and I got to be Adam Vinatieri's ball boy during when he was a senior in or junior in college. I was a junior in high school, and I was basically shagging his balls. So all the balls that went over the pine trees in the end zone, I had to go after those things for him.
Would he big time you in 2020 if you tried to say hello to Adam Vinatieri?
He probably would, yeah.
Okay.
Especially with all those with all that money he made over the years.
And those rings and those big kicks. He'll be in the Hall of Fame for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, man, it's just a great story, and one about perseverance, and that was one of the things he mentioned to me in our chat last week, is just never giving up and keep pushing, and you're going to get 10 to 15 no's before you get that first yes. And the journey continues, and I think his success over these 2 weeks will lend to him getting an opportunity. If Sam Ficken's the guy the rest of the year for the Jets, if he comes back off his injury, and there's a team that needs a kicker down the stretch, I mean, Castillo's got some film on him now that he can make those kicks all the way from 55. And Kevin Harlan even said on the broadcast today he was good in practice from 57. So, there's got to be an opportunity out there for Sergio.
Yeah, well, it's good to end the show on a note like that, especially after some of those things we talked about today. But Alex, thanks for doing this. Anything you want to let people know about Channel 5 Sports this week?
Yeah, man, just to keep watching us, keep interacting with our Twitter page at KRGV Sports. I'm on Twitter at Alex Barrio. We're debuting our new set this week. In fact, it'll happen tomorrow with our 5 o'clock news. By the time people watch this, the people already will see it. But we're really excited about that. Obviously, it's taken us a little bit longer to get there because of COVID and all that. But man, it's beautiful. We're looking forward to kind of taking the next step at Channel 5 from a media perspective and from a technology perspective on our newscast. So we're thrilled about that. And again, keep an eye on us and our pages because things are changing daily on high school football schedules. So if you want the latest information, you want the latest correct information, you're gonna have to stick with us.
Thanks, Alex, and we'll try to do this again.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks, Alex.